Hey guys, Sean Pruitt here, president of Kingdom Exploration. Today, West Texas Intermediate's $55 a barrel, and Brent crude is $62 a barrel. It's very interesting things happening in the oil industry right now. China is growing at an explosive rate, and their demand and hunger for oil is growing tremendously. But they're stuck in the Stone Age, kind of like we were back when we relied heavily upon Saudi oil. And Russia is in the mix in Syria. You got Turkey, you got the Kurds, you got Iran, you got Saudi Arabia. And all these countries are desperate to sell oil at a premium price, and they can't right now. With all the sanctions going on, it's wreaking havoc in the Middle East. And so Saudi Arabia is desperate. Saudi Arabia is ready to bounce oil markets at any cost. They're sitting on a potential $2 trillion pre-IPO. The Saudi Aramco stock could be worth twice as much as Apple, but they cannot put it on the markets until oil prices are $80-something a barrel. Okay, and so OPEC's top producer, Saudi Arabia, has signaled that it's prepared to cut its oil production even deeper than it's cutting now. Nigerian oil minister Temper Selvia told Bloomberg on Tuesday, citing a recent conversation he had with Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salam. He assured me that they are very ready to even cut deeper. Nigerian Minister of State Petroleum Resources told Bloomberg, noting that they did not talk about any new production levels at a meeting on Monday. The ministries discussed the situation of the oil markets and joint cooperation among OPEC countries to maintain its stability, the official Saudi press agency reported. So they are so desperate. I mean, they're beyond desperate. They are going broke right now. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the GDP that America has. We're a mammoth compared to the rest of the world. China has a beautiful GDP, yes. But if you compare it to America, we have a larger GDP and we have energy. China does not have energy. That's what's amazing about this. If you read here, China is the world's largest oil and gas importer. Everybody knows that China has been leading the world in new oil and natural gas demand, except for last year when the U.S. did it. But it was not so commonly known is that China is now the largest oil and natural gas importer. This is really big deal for other consumers. Oil and gas supplies over 60% of the world's energy. 60% of the world's energy is supplied from oil and gas. Now, here's the thing. I was just talking to somebody on the phone today, and he was explaining to me how our infrastructure, our grid, our electrical grid cannot handle any more electricity. Right now, from the time the power is sent down the power line all the way to the resident's house or building or what have you from the power plant, they've already lost half of the electricity. They send 10,000 watts of electricity from the power plant all the way to your house. Only 5,000 made it across. That's because the power grid is in desperate need of more infrastructure. We don't have it, and so how are you going to replace a gas car with an electric car? Now you're going to have to increase the amount of electricity you run down that power line. The grid cannot handle it. It cannot stable. It's unstable. It's impossible. Okay. And China knows this. Otherwise, we'd have already replaced it. We have bottlenecks, and there's no getting around it. And so, China has 1.4 billion people, a government obsessed with economic growth, energy usage that accounts for 25% of the world's total, and ever-extending global reach that has procuring energy supplies at its core, namely oil and gas in any area, any country, at any time. Oil and gas constitute a rising 30% of China's total energy demand. For Chinese leadership, these continuous need to rely more on outside help to get the energy to grow the economy is ultimately problematic. All one has to do is to see the Great Wall itself to know that China has enhanced self-sufficiency and has a foundation of its 5,000-year-old civilization. This helps explain why China is highly active in heavily oil and gas resourced Africa, the Middle East, Canada, South America, as we unrealistically debate the end of oil and gas. The Chinese know that these fuels will remain indispensable for decades to come. Guys, you guys that get these lies in your head from the leftists, the people that talk about the Green New Deal, which is total... I'm a Christian. I'm not going to say anything. But Chinese know that these fuels will remain indispensable for decades to come, just like Vladimir Putin and OPEC. The Chinese know that our unrealism works greatly to their advantage. So bottom line, oil is here to stay. China knows it. Russia knows it. America knows it. That's why Donald Trump is doing whatever he can to sustain oil and gas growth in America. Since 2013 alone, China's oil production has fallen nearly 15%, while its oil demand has risen 30% to 13.8 million barrels a day. Their oil production is falling. They're a 5,000-year-old country. We're only 200-something years old, guys. We just started producing our oil. We've been raping Saudi Arabia oil. We print our money from a printer. We take a clear piece of paper, we put ink on it, and then we send it over to Saudi Arabia, and then they send their rich resources, oil. We printed oil for years. Now we're just now starting to use our resources. Saudi Arabia isn't going to last forever. China, they're starting to see their oil deplete. And so we're the most powerful country in the world because we have the most powerful GDP. The 95% of transactions are done in U.S. currency. Our central banking system is in every country except for North Korea. Screw those guys. And Cuba. Love Cuba. My wife's 100% Cuban, and she look up Mrs. International 2016. But bottom line, the reason why we're in the best position is quite simply that we just started really tapping into our resources, okay? And the Middle East is falling apart. They need 60% of the GDP of Russia is oil, 90% of the GDP of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and most of those countries overseas is oil. Our 8% of our GDP is oil, and our demand for oil is not near as great as China, and China does not have the ability to net oil. They're increasing tremendously, and they're the reason why oil demand is so great, and it's only going to get greater because their hunger to be the superpower is growing. China relies on imports for around 75% of its total oil usage. China also likes to buy crude when prices are low to stockpile its security inventories, a rainy day supply that could currently cover about 80 days of imports. September crude imports were up 11%. So China is in a world of hurt right now with all the sanctions we've put on different countries. Oil is very hard to come by right now, and China is relying upon that. And I think that's going to be the straw to break the camel's back. And China is going to give in to this battle they're having with America. And so I want to look here. Russia, man, Russia calls a U.S. move to protect Syrian oil fields banditry. You know, they're attacking us for doing what we're doing in Syria, but we're protecting Syrian oil fields, and because we know Russia's going to take it over. What are we going to do from there? Who knows? And so there's a lot of articles about U.S. Shale today. U.S. Shale braces for brutal earnings season. I've been saying this for months, guys. I got tired of reading these reports about how Shell's moving full steam ahead. Things are looking good for Shell. And I knew that was completely bogus. A lot of big names will report third quarter earnings this week, and the results are expected to be worse than the same period in 2008. Okay, we already know this, guys. The timing comes as the shale sector is facing somewhat of a reckoning. After years of price volatility with more downs than ups, oil prices have failed to return even remotely close to pre-2014 levels. So bottom line, they were drilling like crazy while oil prices were low because it's cheaper to do lease acquisitions. It's cheaper to drill. So if for 12 months, if they drill 1,000 wells and then oil prices go back to $100 a barrel, those 1,000 wells are going to make them a ton of profit. Well, 1 year went by, 2 years went by, 3 years went by, and oil prices remain low. Thank you, Donald Trump. And so, but Donald Trump is about to run into a problem here. Texas hit hard by shale slowdown. Okay. So this is why I say oil is very fragile right now, because the U.S. economy is, it could be greatly affected if oil prices drop even lower. And if they continue where they're at, there's going to be a lot of kids not getting Christmas presents for Christmas this year. Texas economy is perhaps the most vulnerable to oil price swings, given its leading role in the country's oil industry. Recently, as prices have remained low, talk has begun about the outlook for the state's economy. According to a recent Reuters report, for example, smaller independent oil and gas producers in the Lone Star State are struggling to get loans from banks as the latter becomes increasingly wary of the ability of the borrowers to return the money when the time comes. So it's a good opportunity for smaller investors because big banks are not funding oil and gas deals right now, and so it takes smaller investors to fund oil projects. So right now, lease acquisitions are really cheap, and I'm not in shale. I'm focused on conventional oil plays. Oil prices didn't go up to $50-something a barrel till late 2004. Okay, I remember it like it was yesterday. And we at $50-something a barrel, it was very profitable. But that was only for conventional oil plays where you didn't have to use these massive fracs that Shell needs. Jobs in Texas, oil and gas industry are falling too. The Houston Business Journal reported this month that September saw a 1,100 decline in the number of jobs in the mining and logging sector. Well, of course. I mean, Shell's falling apart. And so so there's a ton of articles about how Shell is falling apart, and it's nice to, I'm not happy that that's happening, but I've been saying it for months now. And so, sorry guys, my video has been covering up the, you guys haven't been able to really read this because my video is too large. So Iran's impossible task, $194 oil. Iran's physical break-even oil price, the one at which the country would be able to balance its budget, is at $194 a barrel. Hey, sorry, Iran. For 2020, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, said in a report on Monday in which it lowered its economic growth forecast for the entire Middle East region due to the U.S. sanctions. Way to go, Donald Trump. Severely constraining Iran's oil exports, the Islamic Republic would have balanced its budget for 2019 if oil prices were at $155 per barrel, according to the IMF's estimates in the Regional Economic Outlook published today. Saudi Arabia, the world's top oil exporters, OPEC's largest producer, would need oil prices at US $86.50 this year and $83.60 next year in order to balance its budget, the IMF predicts. In its report, the fund lowered its estimates for economic growth in the Middle East, citing volatile oil prices, faltering global growth rate, and heightened geopolitical tensions. So, bottom line, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, all of these countries are desperate. Saudi Arabia is ready to bounce oil markets at any cost. Any cost. Now, any cost to America, we put some sanctions out. We send military troops out to protectively but we do it in a way to where we make sure no American lives are lost. We do whatever it takes. But when Saudi Arabia, when Russia, when Iran, when they start doing whatever it takes, there are lives that are being lost. There's bombs dropped. They're in some desperate times, guys. Okay, shale oil, when it falls apart, when American shale falls apart, Americans we're not dropping bombs anywhere. We stay home and we find another way. And we do whatever it takes. But Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, they're a bunch of crybabies, and they don't care about killing lives. They don't care about dropping bombs. They don't care about destroying a country's infrastructure just to control things. That's what they do. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Putin will do whatever it takes to be the greatest leader that Russia's ever had. And right now he's not looking too good. Saudi Arabia, they're desperate right now. And they're going broke, guys. They don't save money, they spend money, they pay people off. They've paid off American politicians and Americans, and they've paid off Iranians and Russians. They pay people off instead of going to war. And so they're going broke, guys, and they're only getting broker, and it's only getting worse. So they're very desperate. And Donald Trump, he's playing a very fragile game right now. Because he has an election in 2020. If he can't solve this oil situation and more American jobs are being lost because of low oil prices, it's going to make him look bad. And so he's got to bounce this thing. He knows OPEC OPEC wants oil prices higher. Russia wants them higher. Saudi Arabia, Iran, every country wants them higher. Shell is one of the biggest growing economies in America, but it doesn't work under these prices. It cannot. And so if we went from producing 6 million a day back in 08, 09, I believe, to 16 million barrels a day, 10 million of that is shale. Well, shale oil has a fast decline curve. The rigs are being taken off the field. I have a lot of buddies that are staying at home right now with their family because they cannot find work in shale right now. Banks are closing the door to shale companies. Shale companies are going out of business every single day. And if you don't drill a bunch of shale, the decline is massive. If we stop drilling shale today, in 2 years, that 10 million a day would drop down to maybe 1 million barrels a day, and oil prices be back up to $300 a barrel. So whatever happens, it's a very fragile game. I'm going to keep a close eye on this thing, and I plan on learning more about the infrastructure and why the green technology can never replace oil. All right, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. I'd love to chat with you if you're ever interested in investing in oil and gas wells. I set up a fund. And this fund is a mutual fund of oil wells, and the tax deductions are incredible. It's set up in a way for every dollar you put into this thing, you get IDCs, intangible drilling costs, 100% tax write-off for IDCs, and then you have expenses that you get a write-off, no different than your mileage on your car or office expenses. And so for every dollar you put into the fund, you get about a 180% write-off, plus some income from the fund itself. All right, guys, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe. Thanks.